Avoiding the legal system by implementing OSHA. My name is Shelley Cain, and this is my graduate project for Professor Deanne Sanchez's class at Amberton University. The outline. Introduction, literary review, then I will show evidence, the limitations of my study, suggestions, the methodology, conclusion to include implications for the 21st century, recommendations, and references. Introduction. How can human resource management help companies protect themselves from an additional lawsuit with OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Act? Comply or not comply? In human resource management, risk management, and worker protection, there needs to be compliance with OSHA because it is best to comply because there are negative impacts when you don't comply with OSHA, during which it will show what works and what does not work when applying OSHA. OSHA is an agency of the United States government under the Department of Labor. It is responsible for making sure that safety and at work and healthful work environment. Congress created OSHA to ensure safety and health work environment for employees by setting and enforcing basic standards and providing training and outreach, education, and compliance assistance. Under OSHA, employers are to provide a safe and healthful workplace for their workers. OSHA started December 29, 1970, with President Nixon. He signed the OSH Act, putting these ideas on employers, workers, after and health professionals, union, and advocates into law. The purpose of this research project is to review the impact of not complying with OSHA and what that means for the 21st century. Introduction continued. Here it will be shown the proper way of applying OSHA in human resource management, the negative impacts on a company when not complying with OSHA, how to help a company comply with OSHA standards, and the implications for the future when they don't comply. The objective of this study is to show the negative impact of not complying with OSHA, including the cost, turnover, and disability. To solve the adverse effects on companies can comply with OSHA. From 1990 to 2016, the cost of violations has gone up 78%. Looking at Design Plastering West LLC in Dallas, Texas, will give a current idea of what violators of OSHA may pay. Design Plaster West LLC was ordered to pay $150,000 in criminal fines and $100,000 in civil penalties when they admitted to 8 willful violations and undergo monitoring by OSHA for 4 years. The reason was a worker fell from a balcony that did not have fall protection. OSHA of 1970 stated that employees are responsible for providing safety and healthful workplace for their employees, and Design Plaster and LLC in Dallas did not offer that. Sometimes not knowing when to report OSHA. Here are some steps to know when to communicate to OSHA when there has been a problem. First, determine if the result of an injury happened at work or another place that is not work-related. If it did happen at work or related to the job, then did the injury cause death, injury, or involve injuries? If death, disease, or injury, there requires medical treatment, loss of consciousness, restriction of movement or work, or transfers to another job, report it to OSHA. Effects of not complying with OSHA are paying fines, monitoring by them, loss of revenue, dealing with workmen's compensation payments, etc. Why is it important to comply and report OSHA? OSHA is employees' legal right to know that they are going to be safe at work. Employers are required to prevent injury and illness and increase compliance with law. Reduce costs, that means workers' compensation premiums, inform work, increase their responsibility goals socially, and increase productivity and improve operations of the business. So the purpose of the study is to show that a company should comply with OSHA. Next, there will be a literary review to explain the pros and cons of complying with OSHA. Literary review. Author David Wheels created an article for the RADS Journal of Economics called "If OSHA is so bad, why is compliance so good?" It is shown there is a link between OSHA enforcement and compliance by 621 working business over 2 decades they studied. Here is shown that compliance with OSHA is a problem, especially with small businesses. The small business that effectively implies OSHA lowers injury rates by 15.3% from 1973 to 1993 from their study group SIC 243 and 2,431. And this includes lowered injury levels for sudden injuries, but the injury that happened over time were not changed, which is common. OSHA is shown to have made a difference in employee compliance with their standards and lowering injuries. Once OSHA does their first inspection of the business and violations occur, the second visit showed significant compliance from about 0.580 to 0.604, which is an almost 4% increase from their first visit to the second in compliance. Due to costly enforcement by the government to comply with OSHA standards, 14% of the total number of participants had 3 or more inspections between 1972 and 1991. Due to complying with OSHA, after their initial inspection, small businesses upgraded their machines, hand guards, hand tools, standards, training operations and safety standards, and other compliance-related training. Even after the first inspection, businesses seen a decrease in lost time, lower turnovers, and lower workmen's compensation costs. Due to the machine standard change, there was a decrease in injury, and that happened on the workday. This study showed that OSHA compliance caused less costs down the road with workmen's compensation and lower injury for the employees. In the fast-paced and unpredictable world that we live in today, there are ways that companies can prevent lawsuits by applying OSHA in human resource management. Nick Hollingster wrote an article in OSG titled "A Shift in Perspective: How Health and Safety Impacts Human Resource Management," showing the importance of complying with OSHA in human resource management. Human resource management went from 1900s clerical work to present day helping companies get their objectives while creating human capital strategy, predicting that by 2020, the driving force behind change is human resource management. Soon, human resource management will be working side by side with CEOs, presidents, and other top management professionals to meet OSHA compliant standards and continue to evolve. Today, human resource management's biggest job is health and safety initiative includes complying with OSHA. In the field of human resource management, there needs to be a good knowledge base for what OSHA is and how to meet and exceed the standards they set. This is being done by having OSHA do dry runs of the business and checking to see if standards were met before the official inspection. Once there is an official inspection, then their violations issued by employers must be complying with those violations and resolve the violations that were issued by OSHA. The employer has every right to appeal the order, but there needs to be some communication with the court on the violation. When an individual does not comply with OSHA, as of 2017, penalties included up to $25,000 and an order to serve jail time up to 12 months. The most a corporation can prosecute up to $500,000 per charge. In March 2017, there was a case with OSHA for workers who fell through the roof and severely injured due to noncompliance from roofing company. The roofing company was fined to pay $57,000 in OSHA penalties. That's crazy. Another example of what could happen if a business does not comply with OSHA is from January 2017. An employer was fined $105,000 in OSHA violations after an employee was killed by an excavator. Remember that there are extra charges if OSHA has issued the same offense before. So in human resource management, it is critical when complying with OSHA to stay on top of record keeping and know what violations are issued. Bottom line is, human resource management jobs are to make sure OSHA standards are maintained and abided by. According to OSHA, court cases filed against violators from 2012 to 2017 are 7,557. In that group, the most were from electrical or computer injuries, which made up about 59%. This was surprising because when this graduate student thinks of court cases for OSHA, she envisions people that died or had severe injuries on the job. So to find that most cases were electrical and computer related showed that companies needed to take more focus in the little things when complying with safety. This comes with attention to detail and knowing OSHA laws. When a business is thorough, knowledgeable, and implements safety as their #1 priority, they don't need to worry about the unnecessary court cases with safety. Literary review continued. Some businesses do not take complying with OSHA seriously. In the National Institute of Health, Raymond C. Sinclair and Thomas R. Cunningham published an article titled Safety in Small Businesses, showing OSHA compliance problems with smaller businesses. Sinclair and Cunningham showed that 19% of 592 small businesses did not conduct safety inspections that would make sure they were complying with OSHA. The reason these small businesses did not meet OSHA standards is due to their attitude about not needing to do the extra safety precautions. There was also less motivation in the business management to support safety training, employee manager corporate cooperation, resources for safety, safety programs, and safety committees. Only 66% of 592 respondents made security a part of the employee orientation. In the small business group, 23% went to safety training in the last 12 months. Managers did not comply with OSHA because 90% of them stated that their business was not even dangerous. Due to OSHA inspections between 1983 and 2002, there had been an increase in safety compliance in small businesses, but this area still needs improvement. Even though there was an increase in agreement, small businesses do not comply with OSHA because the cost to implement safety precautions, lack of controlling humans, their characteristics, and lack of internal pressure. So even though businesses feel they do not need to comply with OSHA, they are sadly mistaken. Not complying with even the simple OSHA standards can lead to a lawsuit. A lawsuit as simple as an injury from a computer or electrical, as shown in the previous pie chart. Evidence. Chemicals increased for businesses in the 21st century. No one, not even the Environmental Protection Agency, knows how many chemicals are in use today. EPA has more than 85,000 chemicals listed on its inventory of substances that fall under the Toxic Substitution Control Act. But the agency is struggling to get a handle on which of the chemicals are in the market today and how they are actually being used. EPA must determine by June 2019 which of its inventory of most of 85,000 chemicals are still in use today. Under revisions made to TPC last year, EPA is requiring to design each of the chemicals on its TSCPA inventory as either an active or inactive use by June 19. EPA also faces a June 19 deadline under the latest law to finalize the scope of risks evaluating for 10 high priority chemicals that the agency selected for review late last year. As EPA works to meet these deadlines and implements other provisions required under the amendment TSCA, the agency is finding specific gaps in its knowledge about chemicals in the U.S. market. EPA lack of knowledge about chemicals is commerce was on full display during a public meeting February 14th intended to help EPA flesh out major uses of their 10 substances selected by the agency for risk evaluations. Stakeholders at this meeting from the industry, environmental groups, and state environments point out using the EPA did not consider many of the 10 chemicals. In other cases, participants claim that some of the 10 chemicals are no longer being produced in the United States and are not being used for certain purposes. For example, 1-D-dioxide is no longer used in ingredients in customer production, reported Paul Diolo, Associate Vice President of Environmental Safety at the American Cleaning Institute and Industry. He encouraged EPA to update the website and stated to reflect the changes, saying the current information is confusing to consumers and overrepresented potential risks. He acknowledged that many of commercial products contain small amounts of 1,4-dioxide, which is formed as a byproduct in manufacturing of certain solvents. Dry cleanings were no longer switching from triglyceride to NPB4 spot. They said this hasn't happened in years. Manufacturing in 2008, and they don't exist today in dry cleaning spot stain removal. Less hazardous spot agents include soy-based cleaners, glycol agents, acetone, and blends of substances and now in use. EPA is information on the manufacturing, importing, process, distributing, use, and disposal of all these chemicals from public availability, including chemical database and TRI data, as well as data provided by the manufacturer, pre-manufacturing requiring and new chemicals. So as you can see, for the 21st century, there will be a lot more chemicals that are unknown and they are still testing. So to stay on top of these chemicals is crucial when a business is trying to comply with OSHA. They need to stay on top of looking up these potentially dangerous chemicals, and knowing how to display them is critical. Safety use, storage, and transportation of chemicals is essential for any facility. Proper safety handling of chemicals by employees and safe chemical operations will prevent accidents, chemical exposure, and chemical release into the environment. The Safety Library contains a very large volume of chemical safety information to assist you in all aspects of your program, from program safety management to proper chemical storage and material safety data sheets use, as well as selection of proper chemical personal protection equipment to protect your employees from chemical exposure. This is how you would comply with OSHA standards. In order to ensure chemical safety in the workplace, information must be available about the identified and hazards of the chemical. OSHA hazard communication standards require the development and dissemination of such information. Chemical manufacturing and importing are required to evaluate the hazards of the chemical they produce, or import and prepare labels and material safety data sheets to convey the hazardous information to their downstream customers. All employers will hazardous chemicals in their workplace must have labels and CDS for their exposed workers and train them to handle the chemicals appropriately. A written hazard communication program ensures that all employers receive the information they need to inform and train their employees properly and to design and put in place employee protection programs. It also provides necessary hazard information to employees so they can participate in and support the protection measurements that need to take in place in the workplace. Employers, therefore, must develop, implement, and maintain at the workplace a written, comprehensive hazard communication program that includes provisions for container labeling, collections, and availability of material safety data sheets and employee training programs. It also must contain a list of hazard chemicals that the employer will use to inform employees of the hazard of non-routine tasks, for example, the cleaning of a vessel, and the hazard associated with chemicals in unlabeled pipes. If the workplace has multiple employers on site, for example, a construction site, the rule requires that employers to ensure the information regarding hazard and protective measures be made available to other employers on site where appropriate. In addition, all covered employees must have written hazard communication programs to get hazard information to their employees through labeling on the containers, SDS, and training. The written program does not have to be lengthy or complicated, and some employers may be available to comply on existing hazard communication programs to comply with the above requirements. The written program must be available to employees, their designated representative, OSHA, and NIOSH. A safety data sheet, often referred to by its acronym SDS, is a detailed information document prepared by the manufacturer or employer of the hazardous chemicals, which describes the physical and chemical properties of the production. Information included in the safety data sheet aids in the selection of safe products, helps employers and employees understand the potential health and physical hazards of chemicals, and describes how to respond effectively to exposure situations. The format of safety data sheet must vary, but there is specific information that must include in each sheet. It is useful to review the information to increase your ability to use an SDS. So as you can see, you need to comply with OSHA by labeling and making it know which chemicals are dangerous. If your employees don't know what chemicals are dangerous, that could be a liability, and then going to OSHA and causing lawsuits as well as injuring your employees. How new penalties by OSHA impact. For the first time since 1990, the U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration will raise its penalties for safety and health violations in the workplace. Those fines haven't increased in more than 2 decades, but due to the new congressional bill signed by President Barack Obama, penalties will increase sharply, some by as much as 80%, according to the Wall Street Journal. In addition, it's expected that the fines for workplace safety and health violations will continue to rise in the future due to inflation. As the penalties increase, businesses will have to invest more time and money in workplace safety and health in order to achieve and maintain compliance with OSHA regulations, in order to avoid fines. Thanks to penalties hikes, corporate risk assessment will become an even more integral aspect of the average American business or company. The Federal Civil Penalty Inflation Act of 1990 permits an increase in federal penalties across the board in order to adjust the fine in accordance with inflation. According to OSHA, along with a few other agencies, was exempt from those increases. The Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1990 spurred an increase in OSHA penalties that year, but the administration was going to have to adjust penalties in the future due to inflation. However, the new budget bill, which President Obama signed into law November 2nd, will cause OSHA fines to play catch up with the current inflation rates. The adjustments will take place before August 1st of next year, and OSHA will be given the authority to adjust penalties in the future to keep up with inflation. The penalties, while minor as compared to fines issued by other government agencies such as Environmental Protection Agency, are still sizable. The more acute fines could increase from $70,000 to $125,000, and more minor citations will jump from $7,000 to $12,500. Reacts predictably have been mixed. Some especially those in the legal community who focus on addressing workplace safety and violations, hope that the increase in the fine will encourage companies to take workplace safety more seriously. There is vitality to this point. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, prior to the foundation of OSHA, more than 4 decades ago, 14,000 workers died on a job annually. Currently, there are more than 12 deaths daily, and according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, preliminary fatal worker injuries for 2014 totaled 4,679. Last year, the average fine from OSHA when a worker was killed on the job was approximately $7,000. Though that number has dropped to around 5,000 due to settlements, some lawyers hope that the penalty increase will cause OSHA to focus less on the minor citations and more on the major issues thanks to the monetary hikes. Especially lawyers who represent industries such as the housing industry that are making a comeback follow the recession are concerned. Any new fines and penalties could damage the frail industry during a time when the recovery is so critical to the nation's economy. Other small businesses also may find the penalties to be too high for them to be affordable. Regardless, in order to avoid payment these increased penalty, companies across the nation will have to focus extensively on ensuring that they meet all of OSHA's workplace safety and health standards and regulations, which means that risk assessment must become a priority in a business, both large and small. The elements of risk assessment. Risk assessment involves analyzing every aspect of a business, from the cubicle to the loading dock, in order to determine compliance with all OSHA standards and requirements, as well as going beyond the standards to assess what could occur in the workplace. In order to prevent accidents or incidents from happening, a business owner can work with a risk assessment specialist to move through the entire business, examining each and every facet for any potential vulnerabilities or anything that might not be up to OSHA standards and regulations and can lead to workplace accidents or incidents. Further, a business owner should work to determine best practices for employees in order to avoid any potential injuries and illnesses when employees are working during the business day. Risk assessment going beyond simple look-for assessment of a business that might be vulnerable to accidents or injury. A proper workplace risk assessment will look at how potential scenarios such as natural disasters could affect workers and the company productivity and bottom line as a whole. Risk assessment also should feature a business impact analysis that will involve analyzing how workplace accidents or incidents may affect the business performance. Ultimately, with a proper risk assessment, the business owner can ensure that the entire company is up to current OSHA standards and regulations, which should not only help avoid any preventable accidents or incidents, but also can help a company avoid a potential of costly OSHA fines. While the increase of OSHA penalties is significant, a business owner can use the increase as an incentive to confirm that the enterprise is up to code with OSHA, avoiding penalties and workplace accidents. It is best interest of all parties involved to be prepared. Limitations of study. There was a limitation of this study by only having data from small business compliance stats found. There was not enough compelling data for bigger businesses. There needed to be more background information regarding OSHA incorporated into the study. Lack of current violation penalties had the education suffer in their current understanding of the effects of not complying with OSHA. This graduate student suggests more research with substantial business compliance with OSHA. Also, more research was done on incidences that did not go to OSHA for penalties for the current day. Studies more on OSHA law and regulation. Methodology. Throughout a thorough literary review and internet searches reviewed multiple cases, studies that reported compliance with OSHA or not, controlled, measured, collected, and summarized. Conclusion and meaning for the 21st century. How can human resource management help companies protect themselves from an additional lawsuit with OSHA? Comply or not comply? In human resource management, implication, risk management, and worker protection are crucial in avoiding violations with OSHA. Therefore, complying with OSHA is best because there are negative implications when not complying with OSHA. These negative implications include fines, jail time, bad reputation, employee injury, and even employee death. The reason some companies do not comply with OSHA is because of financial constraints, lack of motivation, and they do not see the importance and lack of knowledge. Congress created OSHA to make sure the safety and healthful conditions for working employees are met by setting and enforcing standards and providing training, outreach, education, and compliance assistance. What OSHA means for the 21st century is, due to the increase of chemical use over the past 20 years, there is a new safety measure that needs to be taken so that employees do not get injured from these chemicals. Different chemical companies come with a variety of effects from exposure. So with the changes of chemicals for the 21st century business, they need to comply with OSHA to keep their employees safe. Changing chemicals for the workplace is one of the many risks in the workplace, so human resource management and business as a whole need to inform and stay informed on OSHA standards and how to maintain compliance. Following this presentation, there will be a 10-minute question and answer session with Dr. Deanne Sanchez. Recommendations. Some recommendations this graduate student recommends for today's workforce is to comply with OSHA. Complying with OSHA is not just one person's job, it's the complete business effort. Combat the imitation of the study by getting educated on OSHA law and regulation. Some businesses do not know they are not complying with OSHA until there is a severe violation, and they end up paying fees and workman compensation for the injuries of employees. Understanding the current laws and regulations on OSHA is critical. Thank you for viewing my presentation. If there are any questions, please email me at the email provided.